Hi y'all. Um, I'm trying to film a sit-down video for kind of the first time, because the other one I've done of this was scripted, and that's different. So we'll see how this goes. I really like makeup. I am obnoxious about it. It is what got me through quarantine, and one of the things I like the most about makeup is eyeshadow. And because in preparation for doing this video, I realized I have exactly 15 eyeshadow palettes. I'm gonna rank them. I'm gonna go through all my palettes. I'm gonna talk about why they're in the rankings they are in, what I like about them, what I don't like about them. I do like all of these palettes to some extent. If I didn't like them, I would have given them to someone else and just gotten rid of them. But I do have them. I like all of them for various reasons. Some of them I have tried more than others, and that's part of why they're higher up. Some of these were gifts from other people. If for whatever reason you are the person who gifted me the palette and you're watching this video, I appreciate the gifts. I'm very thankful for them. They're all over the rankings, so like it's here, there, no hard feelings, please. I'm gonna scooch over to the side and start talking about palettes. The first palette is Taste Beauty collaboration with Nerds Candy. It's this pastel rainbow palette. It is the main issue with this palette is there are some very beautiful shadows that do the pastel, like they're pigmented, they're easy to work with. Um, there's quite a few shadows in here that are just so chalky that I don't even know if I want to try to use them because I am fairly certain it's either just going to be dust on my eyes or they're just going to blend into nothing. And for that, this sits at the bottom. I have never done a full look with just this palette because I tend to use pastels as companion palettes for other things, just to like have a blending shade or something like that. And this, I'm gonna give it a shot soon with the shades that do seem to work really well and see how I like them. Um, but there's another pastel palette I have that ranks a lot higher than this one, and you will see that eventually. Number 14. It's probably going to be a little hard to see because of the glare from the glass, but it's the Profusion Cosmetics Mixed Metals palette. This was a Christmas kind of exclusive palette like 3 years ago or something crazy like that. She is old, but oh my god, holds up pretty well. This is the hardest thing to film, Jesus Christ. It has these bronzers kind of things, and then it has entirely shimmers with one matte white and a semi matte black. It's that like matte with weird glitter chunks in it formula that is actually pretty good in this palette. I'm not opposed to an all shimmer palette, but I literally only use these three shades and I only use them with other palettes. Um, I realized when I was doing my rankings for this video that eventually when I get a magnetic palette, I'm gonna pop all these shadows out and use it there because just individually I like everything, but together it just doesn't work. Like it's not hard. Like formula wise, it's pretty good for a palette that's 3 years old, and Profusion Cosmetics eyeshadows do kind of go bad after a while. To get like the pigmentation at the comically cheap price point this palette was at. Other than that, it's just kind of yeah. Like I said, I like it everything individually. Um, the bronzers, none of these are like the exact shade for me. This lightest one is the closest, but I have to mix these two together to get something like decent, and I'm just too lazy to do that. And I just, in general, I don't want to have to pull out a whole palette just to have a bronzer, especially when I'm not using this palette on its own because it only really works to pull in a shadow. Um, so yeah, this is at 14, unfortunately. This matte white though can't be beat. Even I'm a little surprised that this is at 13 for me. There's a very specific issue I have been having with the Beauty Bay Midnights palette. Um, It's the color story on this is just stunning. Like the color story is so pretty, especially the one in the 16 pans that I have is really cool. This comes in multiple sizes. Um, the shimmers in here are just insane. Like I don't know what they're putting in those shimmers. It's like crack, basically, like crack in eyeshadow form. It is so like the shimmers are so good. I love some of the mattes in here. Notice some of the mattes, the darker. Oops, I just smacked that. The darker mattes, which are what I was predominantly wanting this palette for because I didn't have that many like dark blues and purples and stuff like that. And even the black does this. I don't know if my technique or something, but they come off patchy, like just patchy as can be. And the shipping on this was expensive, um, and that was kind of it wasn't kind of, it was really disappointing. And I'm gonna give this a couple more tries. Um, but I would not be surprised if at some point in the near future I give this to a friend of mine. I have a friend or two who I think might get a good use out of this, because I think they have a darker skin tone than me, so they might not have the patchiness issue. But God, I don't know why I have that issue with this palette because I don't have that issue with the other palette I have from this collection. Like, not nearly as bad as I do with like the dark blues and purples. So it's I'm gonna give her some more time, but we have an estranged relationship. We need to go to like relationship therapy, me and this palette. The next palette is from a brand I did not know existed until I got this as a gift. It is the Bad Blood palette from Amorus, USA. It's a name in French, I believe. It's this big thing. My grandma got it for me from TJ Maxx, and honestly, oh, I have not flipped this back. It's it's one of those other palettes that has a shimmery background. You're just gonna have to sit through that. It's actually good. Like I like it. The mattes are decently easy to work with. There's a lot of similarities between some of the shades, but that's gonna come with any big palette like this. I definitely prefer smaller palettes, but if I need a random ass neutral color to make something work, I dip into this palette. Um, in the ooh, I will say, Con, I just noticed it's starting to get an odd smell. Um, very baby powdery. I've had palettes get that smell before, and they still worked fine, but maybe this is just getting a little old. That's why it was at TJ Maxx, maybe. Um, yeah, it's got some these like dark neutrally reds. It's got some lavenders. The shimmers in here, I was pleasantly surprised by. Especially a couple of the gold ones. They were just very foily, I think is the word I'm looking for, and just really pretty and cool. And I was very pleasantly surprised by this palette. And also the packaging is like that's just I gotta appreciate good packaging when I see it, you know? The next one is an unpleasant surprise, I would say. It is the My Chemical Romance X hipdot Black Parade collaboration. Um, the main problem I have with this is the packaging. It looks very cool. It's meant to look like a CD. However, it's so weird to open. Like it does feel like a very sturdy packaging, but specifically the way you open it with like that CD kind of clasp, just it makes me feel like the thing's gonna pop apart every time I do it. The inside art though, I love this. I might end up putting this on my wall at some point. The actual color story is pretty good. Hipdot is not. I would have done something different, but like I understand why they went this route instead. My only main issue with the color story is that these couple neutrally browns are. It doesn't look like it on camera. Are very warm, and the gray and even this red are cool toned. This may not be an issue for a lot of people, but I personally, that made it very hard to get these to work well together. Um, Particularly when I tried to blend things. Things happened. It tended to get a little bit muddy, That might have just been that I've never had to work with cool and warm tones in one eye look before in like this kind of capacity. But I will say I love this red. Red is my favorite eyeshadow color. It's very good. Hipdot does their mattes very well. There are, however, that I know this is the last palette and this palette, and I know these are a con for a lot of people. I'm one of the 3 people who do actually like pressed glitters, and this has a black one and a gold one. I will say, I love the gold pressed glitter. It is exactly what I want out of a gold pressed glitter, and I haven't gotten the chance to use this like blacky gray one yet, but I'm a little curious because it feels to me specifically a little bit greasier than the yellow one, which makes me think it's gonna get all weird and gross in my crease. So we'll see when I get the chance. But yeah, this is 11. Yep, this is number 11. So it's just out of the top 10, unfortunately. Coming in at number 10 is the Profusion Cosmetics Pastel Palette. Um, this is a random palette. It was almost just out of the top 10. Like, I was debating between this one and the MCR one. It's very simple. It's just these matte pastels. The lavendery shade is like slightly shimmery. It's not really a shimmer. It's not quite a satin. Um, Maybe it is a satin, and I don't know what a satin is. No clue. But it's a matte palette basically of just these light pastel shades. And on its own, I don't really use this unless I'm doing a baby blue or a lavender eyeshadow look, and this is what I'm choosing to use. Don't worry about it. But other than that, I mostly use this to blend out other shadows, and that is what this palette is good for. It is very good as like a companion palette for other ones just to blend stuff out, and I love using it for that, and it works really well as that. And this was $5. Yeah, their 10 pans I think are still $4 or $5, hopefully. Um, which is really nice. Like especially for $5, this is very pigmented, especially for pastels, which I've tried ones from way more expensive brands, like in store, where I was like, why are you charging this much for a pastel shade that doesn't even show up? But yeah, these work pretty well. I'll talk more about this 10 pan formula later on. Next up is the Fine Feathered palette from Colourpop, coming in at number 9. Um, I can't show you the inside of this palette because I was fiddling around with the shades in my Colourpop ones, and this just accumulated a bunch of the random excess ones. But it's this like monochromatic mauvey, pinky kind of color story, um, and it started a pink obsession that we will get into very, very soon. Um, of the pink palettes I have, it's the most neutral of them. It has the nicest darker shades. I would definitely go into this palette a lot to grab its darker shades to deepen up a crease, put it on my under eyes, that kind of a thing. Or, yeah, under eye. And that's what I mostly use this for, and it had some nice blending out shades. And it's just a good, nice little palette, and it's Colourpop, so the formula is very good. It's just one of those palettes that's just like, it's good. Like, I don't have anything particularly bad to say about it. Other than like a lot of Colourpop monochromatic palettes, there's a couple shades in this palette that are like complete repeats of each other. Like I could put them right next to each other in swatches and I see zero difference. Um, but that's just a Colourpop. That's like the one qualm I have with this palette. I don't. It's a neat little palette. I like it. Next up at number 8, another one that the light likes to reflect on is the blooming or bloomin' quad from Wet n Wild. This was for part of their cherry blossom collection that I bought a couple things from, and this was the only thing from it that I actually liked. It's this cute little pink quad. This was also part of my pink obsession. There's just like neutrally peachy kind of shade, a matte pink, a shimmer, and then a pressed glitter. Um, I know if you don't like pressed glitter, you will not like this. You can't get it anymore unless you want to go and like Depop and you find it. You get it secondhand or something. Um, yeah, she's it's whenever I need just like a pink pop in here, and like the one thing I could say is like a negative for some people with this palette is that a lot of the looks do tend to look the same because you're just working with foreshadows and you'd have to get very creative to make different eye looks with them. But this is ye old faithful if I want just a go-to kind of pink, and God, I love this pressed glitter. This was the pressed glitter that convinced me that, oh, I do in fact like pressed glitters. It's so just sparkly and pretty, and it doesn't get weird in my crease, and I like it. I'm willing to suffer through it getting stuck in my eye. I like that pressed glitter so much. That the pressed glitter is kind of carrying this palette. I can't lie. It's this and the palette before it switched back and forth several times when I was planning this. The next palette at 7, this is number 7, I can count to 15, is the Child palette from Colourpop. This is the one I've fiddled around with. But it's this like neutrals with, it's this green with like 2 neutrals in it because that's the thing Colourpop likes to do. But look at the packaging. He's so cute. I have the packaging of this, like the box that came in. I cut off the front part and it's on my wall now. It's so, so cute. And it's a little bit beat up. I have traveled with this palette before. Um, it's got this cute mirror. It's just adorable. You can see some of the green shades. I kept the bottom 3, and these 2 are from the original palette. I was just trying to mimic, I think it's a JD Glow palette or something that I wanted, I'm never gonna have. So I realized I could just make it with my Colourpop shadows. Yeah, this is cute. It's just, it has this lovely mint green in it normally that I love that mint green. I would die for that mint green. It's so good. It's a cute little palette. It's on theme for a Colourpop collaboration. They're kind of bad about that. So it's on theme. It's cute. The formula is wonderful. There's a shimmer in here there's a shimmer in the palette that I've had issues with, which is why it's not like higher. I don't always pull for this palette, but like when I do, I like what I create with it. The last couple were ones I just kind of like liked. There's weird ones in the middle where like there's mostly good, but there's like 1 or 2 things I'm not super big on. This is number 6, and this is the Berries palette from Beauty Bay. This is the other one from that collection I have. I decided not to get the green palette because I knew I wouldn't use it. But this is a palette I do. I love this palette. It's a pink monochromatic palette. This was also the pink obsession I mentioned that I had for a while there. These 2 just bright fucking pinks. Oh my god, I love them. I want to eat them. I need them injected into my veins. I love those bright pinks so much. And the dark, I don't have the issue with the darker colors that I have with the other Beauty Bay palette with this palette. Aside from like occasionally this shade will do it, but only occasionally. It's a technique thing I'm figuring out with this formula. The formula is really nice. I love the shimmers of this. Again, it's a bit more of it's a very warm pink is how I would choose it. It's kind of corally, but like pink, which makes 0 sense, but like it makes sense if you use it in person. It is so good. Like I just love shoving that all over my eyes. Like it's great. Just this I think is, yeah, I'd say this is my favorite pink palette. It's also the most versatile, and I like it. I like pink eyeshadow. I like this pink eyeshadow palette. There's not much else to say about it. We finally reached the top 5, and coming in at that number 5 spot is the Daisy Does It's palette from Colourpop. Daisies are my favorite flowers. That is why I bought this palette. It just so happened that I really like it. It's the newest palette in my collection, I would say, and it is the weirdest thing to be so high up on the list for someone who really does prefer bright colors as opposed to neutrals. But this is like, you know how there's those palettes that are meant for people who like neutrals but are getting into color? This is one of those palettes that like, if you're someone who just prefers color over neutrals any day of the week, like this is like exposure therapy to neutrals, because there's these 2 shifty, very light shades with this like translucent base that I love to use as highlighters. I love to put them in the inner corner. They're delicious. They're like kind of duochrome but like not really. Um, and there's obviously this like neutrally coral stuff going on, but then there's the yellow and there's like these four greeny kind of colors that are just so interesting and unique to play with. And I love working with this palette. Like it's my go-to, it's my travel palette basically. That's what I've been using it for the most. And yeah, comes up at number 5. It's packaging's cute, the concept's cute. I like the color story. I like the formula. It's colourpop. It's pretty like standard, not standard. It's a good formula. Like I have no qualms with this palette. Number 4 is very beat up, but the Euphoria palette from Profusion Cosmetics. As you can see, the matte black in this has a big old pan in it. This is one of those cases where I know for a fact that that shade in my specific palette was like a fluke in formula, but it was a really good fluke in formula. Um, and it does almost look like there's a couple others that are like a little kind of close. Um, and it's got this row of just gray tones, which I love to use, and then it's got this like the blues and the teal I admittedly don't use, but this purple like shifty kind of shimmery shade is just so good. Like it just looks so nice and I love using it. And I obviously pull for the grays quite often. I'm um I'm not dressed this bright normally. I don't know what word I was looking for, but I'm not dressed this bright most of the time. I'm normally a little emo kid. Um, Sometimes I like to be obnoxiously bright. You can take the kid out of the scene, but you can't take the scene out of the kid. God, these are so. I just really like this. This is a very easy one to just grab and use. Even though I never use those two blue shades. They're not bad. I just don't pull for them, and I probably should. Um, but like, I just love this. This is like this deserves to be at number 4. It's a bit older, and I will mention this when I get to the. I'll probably bring this up again when I get to the last Profusion palette I have in these 10 pans. I think they changed the formula of this from what I've seen of other people using the newer ones. These are quite old. I can't vouch for that new formula, but I will say the old one is very good. Coming in at number 3, we have the recently discontinued High Tide palette from Colourpop. I did not realize this until just now, but 3 of my top 5 are unavailable. But if you find them or you have them, good luck. This is of Colourpop's monochromatic palettes. This is probably the most unique one they've done since they started doing it. Because it's these teal colors. Like, it's not just a blue monochromatic palette, it's not just a green monochromatic palette, it's teal, which I feel like on the makeup market is like a bit harder to find. And I remember the first time this came out, and I remember just going, oh, that's cool. Like, finally, you did something unique in a monochromatic palette, which is funny because the other palettes it came out with, Colourpop's kind of already done a couple times, but like this one I was freaking out about. And I'm so glad I got my hands on this before it got discontinued. Otherwise, I think I would have been so upset. Um, to like actually talk about the palette. It's the color story is very good. It goes dark, it goes light. It has a bunch of these midtones. The shimmers in here are actually good. I'm not the biggest fan of Colourpop shimmers. Their mattes are hard to beat in like the cheaper price range. They're kind of hard to beat in my opinion. But their shimmers, they let me down quite often. These ones are really good though. The light one is just cute. The mid-tone one is just, I love putting it like on my lower lash line. And there's a darker, not, it's more of a satin than a shimmer that looks really cool on the eyes. And just this palette's so cool and it's unique in my collection and like I like it. And when I first got this, I used it repeatedly, and there's been times where I just went like a week straight where all I used was this palette. Even if it didn't fit with my outfits, I was like, I want the yummy, yummy teal greens on my eyes. And yeah. At number two, we have the other 10 pan Profusion Cosmetics palette in my favorite eyeshadow color, which is bright fucking red. Um, there's so many bright reds to choose from in this one, and there's this orange, which is pretty good. This was either the first or second eyeshadow palette I ever bought. Um, I know, a little insane to some people. But I just saw it and I was like, that looks delicious. And these are $5. And for $5, this was like crazy good. A little difficult to learn on. I wouldn't recommend it if you're new to bright colors. But if you want like to try bright colors and you need like a cheap option, I think these are still about $5. Um, I love the bright reds. I love this orange. I love the shimmers in this palette. Profusion shimmers, I don't think I mentioned this. They can just go so hard for no good reason. Like, there's no reason in such a cheap palette they should be so good. But, like, they can manage it. Um, Specifically, this gold. I think about this is like my go-to gold most of the time. I have these two like nice reddish ones, and yeah, I just like red eyeshadow, and this is exactly what I like, which is red eyeshadow. Just put it everywhere, all over my body. God, I love red eyeshadow. My number one favorite eyeshadow palette in my collection, uh, the My Chemical Romance X Hipdot 3 Cheers for Sweet Revenge palette. I like this is my favorite My Chem album. You can tell. I really like red eyeshadow. I love this palette. I liked this palette when I first got it. Like I just liked it. The mattes in here are wonderful. There's only one shimmer that isn't like my favorite thing to use as an eyeshadow, but we'll get to that in a second. Um, but if there's one shimmer that's not my favorite thing, that's fine. The rest of this is matte. Um, and they're very good mattes. The only one I've ever had issues with is this dark purple. Something about dark purples in my skin just they don't like each other. I'm not sure why, but I have found ways to use it since then. And it's got two bright reds that they're not super distinguishable on the eye. I will say that, but they matter to me and nobody else. And I just the more bright reds in a palette, the more likely I am to like it. Um, what I think put this palette at number one for me was I started trying my hand at trad goth makeup recently. And this is just really good palette for that. Like that's a weird like I didn't consider that as a use until I was doing it. I was like, oh my god, I need like there's great gray tones in that Euphoria palette I mentioned earlier. But I was trying to get like use gray eyeshadows like a blush on the white base and like a bronzer contoury kind of a thing, and it just wasn't. It was pulling at the it was looking a little not patchy but like weird and was pulling at the face paint I was using because it sucks. Um, and this white matte white came in handy because I used it as a setting powder. And this gray and the gray shimmer I mentioned not liking as an eyeshadow made really good for doing sort of blush, sort of like contoury stuff when I was doing drag goth makeup, like just god tier combination for that. And of course, matte black, bright reds. The only two shades in here I don't really use are the like brownie colors, but like I'll find a use for them. They'll get used eventually. Like I just need a brown to like deepen up reds most of the time. That's what I use. So this is my number one. This is my child. Um, this I think of the three My Chem collabs Hipdot did, I think this was the best of the three. It was also the first one they did, so I'm not sure about that. Um, what happened there? But I'm glad I managed to get my hands on this. There was a whole thing about getting this palette where I didn't get it originally, but then they did a random restock without telling anybody. Like they didn't post about it until like an hour later on their Instagram, and I was just on their website coincidentally right as they restocked it. I sent it to my mom, and she immediately got it for me. And this was like my only birthday present 2 years ago. So, not 2 years ago, a year ago. I don't. One of my birthdays. This was like the main palette because this was fucking expensive. Like they're crazy. But I'm glad I have it. I would be. I don't. I would be very sad if I didn't have it, honestly. But I have her. She's here with me, and she is. This is. She's my baby. I love this. I would travel with this if it weren't for the fact that I'm deathly afraid of something happening to it because I can't get this replaced. Okay, that was me ranking all the eyeshadow palettes I have. Um, I think I did pretty well with ranking them. I'm not entirely sure how well I did explaining them, but like, hopefully you got the vibes of what you were picking up what I'm putting down. Um, yeah, this was a really fun video. I do hope to do more makeup content because I'm physically incapable of shutting the fuck up about makeup to everybody I know. Um, so yeah, this is the end of the video now.